As a fantasy author, I love world building, but it's super easy, as I'm sure that you are well aware, to get carried away. So in today's episode, I want to give you a time-saving question that will hopefully prevent you from going down any extraneous world-building rabbit holes in your fantasy novels. Hi, I'm Jed Herne, author of the fantasy novella Fires of the Dead, and this is Daily Writing Advice. So the question is, do you need it? Do you need it? So, this really interesting political system that you're working out in your current fantasy book, do you need it? Is it essential to your story about a bunch of characters going off on a quest into the wilderness where they're probably not going to encounter said political system? It might give you some extra flavor for one or two scenes, maybe as some backstory, maybe it will explain some motivations for some characters, but you might not need it. It might not actually be essential to your story, and well, it's certainly fun to explore these aspects of your world, and for me, that's one of the big reasons why I love writing fantasy, is to explore these different worlds, to create these different societies and cultures. It might be a waste of time. It might not be something that's as important for me to focus on as developing my characters. Because in this story that I just conjured up there, I would much rather focus on developing my central cast of characters who are going off on this quest, rather than figuring out the political system of the city they came from that maybe only gets mentioned in chapter 1. So, do you need it? Do you need to flesh out all of the things in your world building that you are fleshing out? This is the essence of overcoming what's often called world builder's disease, which is where you get so carried away with world building and with working out all the tiny details of your civilization that you procrastinate from actually writing the book. And J.R.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings, is kind of the classic example of world builder's disease, where he spent ages figuring out what the world was like, going so far down into the language and the songs and histories that weren't even really that impactful for the book, before he actually wrote the darn thing. So that's totally fine, and that's really fun if that's what you're after. But for me, I would rather focus my energy on developing the things that are crucial for this story. So if the political system matters, great, it's going to be developed. If the magic system's important, excellent, I'm going to work hard on that. If the way that the architecture is different in this world to ours matters, I'm going to focus on that as well. But if these things aren't crucial, I might do a little bit of work on them, but I will focus mainly on the things that are important. So, do you suffer from world builder's disease in your fantasy books? Have you spent maybe too long outlining the world when it won't affect your story? Let me know in the comments below. Or if you can't see the comments because you're listening to this as a podcast, send me an email at jed.herne1@gmail.com and just let me know. Has this been an issue for you? How have you been able to overcome it? Is it not an issue for you? And why do you think that is? So, I've been Jed Herne, and this has been Daily Writing Advice. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you could check out Fires of the Dead, my debut fantasy novella. I'm really proud of how it's turned out. And if you enjoy fantasy, you will really love this book. It's about magicians called pyromancers who can draw energy from fires to create their own flames. And that's the world it's set in, and you'll pretty clearly see some of the stuff I talked about in relation to world building in this book, because even though it's set in a world where I will probably write more in the future, I only purposefully concentrated on a really small part of the world so that I had lots of options left over for future books. So if you want to see what I'm talking about with that, and you want to see if I actually follow my own advice in my fantasy books, go check out Fires of the Dead. So, thank you so much for listening. Now go and write extraordinary stories.